Okay, so last week we ended up in the middle of the chapter about humility because we began going through the different character traits which Shabbos endows us with, which Shabbos gives to us. And the first one that we said is humility, very simply, because we as human beings can sometimes think that we are in control of the world. We think that it is our world to come and go as we please, we control it, and therefore, Shabbos says to us, we desist from all those acts, the 39 malachas, which we defined as malacha, is any act that shows our creative power over the natural world. So when we stop doing those things, then essentially what we're showing is that Hashem is in charge. That is the remembrance of Hashem creating the world. We said the only act, the only one of those 39 that doesn't fit in with this definition of our creative acts that show our mastery over the natural world was carrying. Because we said carrying, really, essentially, you're not changing anything. Cooking, you're changing the substance of the food, the taste of it. Building, obviously, building something or putting it together. Even writing, you're taking an implement and you're making something which is a meaningful communication on pen and paper with it. Whereas when you're carrying, you're just taking an object and you're moving it inside the house, outside the house. And therefore, we asked, why is it that that shows our mastery over the natural world? And we said that that actually is about social interactions as well. So when we discuss carrying, when we say that we're not going to carry on Shabbos, then what we're saying is our social interactions also, Hashem is in charge of those. And like we spoke about that hierarchy as well, that even with our dealings between the private and the public domain, the individual and the community and the tzibur, so all of those things are also subject to the hierarchy that we know first and foremost that Hashem is in charge of those. So we're on page 29, and he now shows, the Chief Rabbi Goldstein shows how these two aspects, we in fact mention them every Kiddush. Every time we say Kiddush on Friday night, as we will do tomorrow night, we mention these two aspects of Shabbos, the second paragraph on page 29. These two dimensions of Shabbos are reflected in the two historical reference points that the Torah connects to Shabbos. God creating the world and God freeing us from Egypt. So I don't know if you've noticed, sometimes we can sort of speed read our way through Kiddush, week in and week out, without realizing there's two distinct things that we mention in Kiddush. We say, Zikaron Lama'aseh Bereshis, that Shabbos is a remembrance of the creation of the world, which you all know God rests on the seventh day. That one maybe is the easier one, more obvious one. But then we say, Zecher Liyetzias Mitzrayim, that it's also remembrance of the Exodus from Egypt. Both of those things we are commemorating when we make Kiddush, which is really the introduction. So when we keep the entire Shabbos. So he says that these 2 points of reference, historical reference, are actually these two aspects of the activities, the malachas that we don't do on Shabbos. He continues, creation reminds us that Hashem is the source of all things, including our own creativity and achievements. Meaning creation is that God created everything. He is the source of everything. All of our creative powers as human beings, essentially, Hashem is the source of everything. The Exodus, Yetzias Mitzrayim, reminds us that Hashem oversees our society and that therefore our social interactions should also be under his guidance. Both teach us to be humble, meaning these two aspects of Shabbos are reflected in the two remembrances. When you remember the creation of the world, that corresponds to the 38 malachos, the ones which are about our creativity. We say, 1 second, we're very creative, we control a lot, but we're not God. God created the world. And then the final one, which is carrying, which is about our social interactions, that's about the Exodus from Egypt, which is when Hashem creates the Jewish people, a brand new social grouping in the entire world. And there we say Hashem is in charge of our social interactions. He's on top of all of those as well. Humility is about recognizing the intrinsic value, he continues, appreciating the preciousness and the essential equality and dignity of every person created in the image of God. It is about recognizing that whatever gifts we may have come directly from God and do not make us better than another person, but only impose on us greater responsibility to do good in the world. As we said, this has nothing to do with a person being lacking self-confidence, with a person not realizing about their talents. Rather, let's realize what we can do, but attribute that to God and feel a responsibility to use those talents for the good. That's what real humility is all about. In the letter to his son, the Ramban, Nachmanides, describes humility as the finest of all character traits, and Shabbos enables us to cultivate it. What better way to be able to bring that character trait into our lives than having a Shabbos, which the Ramban says is the finest of all character traits, That is humility. We're continuing to chapter 6. Hopefully you should have been sent a copy, so you'll have the text as well. It's on page 31. This is a really interesting chapter because I think in a way gets to the heart of what Shabbos is all about. Everybody knows the term Shabbos menucha, menucha meaning rest. And we all think of that as being, having a rest on Shabbos afternoon, right? The famous Shabbos shluch. That's what we consider it to be. Now, is it just about that though, or is there something more to it? So he calls this chapter still. So again, we're looking at different character traits, and this one he calls still, as in a stillness or a quietness. And he says the following: when we are in a state of pressure, our decisions and actions can become instinctive, emotional, and reflexive without any real deliberation or sense of perspective. We may act rashly, stumbling, causing harm to others and to ourselves. On top of this, anxiety and stress damage the body and cause us emotional pain. I think as a society, we are now more aware of these things than ever before, of making sure that we take care of our mental health. Because as he says, when we're in a situation that we're stressed, we lose that sense of perspective. By the way, on the other hand, in our society, we may be more aware of this, but I feel we have more things that cause us to be stressed. And the pace of society has become so fast that therefore maybe there are more and more people who are unable to find that stillness, that calmness. He continues, when we are calm and measured in thought and action, when we are still, we are able to decide wisely, to act prudently, and live contentedly. Pirkei Avos teaches us to be deliberate in judgment. The first Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, Heve Mesunim Badim, be deliberate, be careful, be calm, be patient when you judge situations. At a basic level, it refers to a judge who must carefully and dispassionately weigh the facts of a case without rushing to conclusions so that justice can be done. But being deliberate in judgment is also a general principle for living wisely and applies to our personal decisions, large and small. The Forester on the Mishnah say it's not just to a judge, but we are all judges. Throughout our life, we are called upon to make judgment calls in different situations. How do we do that? If we do it in a state of panic, if we do it in a state of rushing, if we do it in a state where we're reflexive, where we're just instinctive, emotional, then we're not going to make the right decisions. We have to be able to slow things down. We have to be able to think carefully about things. We make judgments about people, he continues, in situations all the time. These decisions can have serious consequences for ourselves and those around us. To be deliberate is to think something through patiently and deeply. This tranquil state of mind allows for clarity of thought and rational analysis, which are crucial to good decision making. Again, how often are our decisions just merely one which is instinctive? And sometimes by our instinct is to follow the crowd. That's also not a good enough reason for making a decision. How often do we just make the decision because that's what we've done in the past? That's not a real reason to make a decision. It's not a way to make a decision. But if we, as he puts it, have a tranquil state of mind, then we can actually analyze things and really think about things and then make the decision. To live wisely, he continues, we need to nurture inner calm. We need to be serene. This approach is useful in every aspect of life. The laws of Shabbos are designed by Hashem to create an atmosphere conducive to a state of being called menucha, a feeling of complete calm and serenity. I don't know about you, but just putting my phone away on Shabbos, I immediately feel calm. Before Shabbos has started, and I'm about to go off to shul and I turn it off. That itself, it just, it's kind of like, there's a sense of calmness because there's a certain things now people can contact you by speaking to you, they can contact you in shul, they can come around to your house, etc. But there's all these other things that just are no longer going on in your life. So there's a state of menucha, there's a state of calmness. I'm sure, that when a woman stands and lights candles, which is a real, a beautiful way of bringing in the Shabbos. I've never myself, I've actually done it. I have done it, once or twice until has been in hospital, etc. But there's a sense of calmness that comes over you, that change in mood. That's menucha. As he puts it, the opposite of menucha is behola, which literally means panic or frenzy or anxiety. Shabbos shields us from the forces that foment panic, confusion, and instability, and creates time and space for us to regain our emotional and spiritual balance, to be still. The greatest mistake of Jewish history was made in a state of frenzy and panic. 40 days after Hashem spoke to the people at Sinai, they made a golden calf to worship in an act of rebellion that seems incomprehensible, right? Remember, this is the people that had just received the Torah. How on earth could they do this, then create this golden calf to worship instead? It happened, he says, because they panicked when they thought that Moshe, who led them out of Egypt, would not be returning to them, following his prolonged encounter with God on the mountain. In a state of intense anxiety and vulnerability, fearing for their survival in the desert and uncertain about their future, they lost their collective mind and fell into idolatry. That's how far it can go, that episode comes about. Rashi on the Chumash speaks about this. He speaks about how they panic and they run in disarray. Where's Moshe gone? And we need to do something. We need to have an alternative leader. And that comes about because they were panicked. They were in a state where they're not thinking carefully, not thinking properly. He continues, the entire framework of restrictions and experiences of the Shabbos day is a formula for serenity. How beautiful is this? Our Creator himself says, I created you. I know that you need time out of life in order to have that state of serenity. And again, this is even before mobile phones existed, right? This is humanity since its very inception. And therefore, these are the things that you need to take a step back from, these 39 categories. And these are the formula of serenity. As he continues, the 39 categories of work we don't do and don't even speak about bring relief. The carefully crafted moments of prayer and Torah learning bring us tranquility. Festival meals, candle lighting, kiddush, blessing children, all of them combine to create the perfect formula for calm and stillness. I have to tell you, as a shul rabbi and also working in Seed as an educator, when you think of different formulas and you're sort of coming up for an event plan, and I often kind of like walk home on Shabbos day, after shul with Tehillah, and I sort of look at it and I say, it's just the most perfect combination. You've got everything there on Shabbos day. You've got time for davening, then you've got time for a talk in the middle, some education in the middle, then you've got the food at the end, you've got time for opportunity for people to schmooze. If you just think about the activities that we do and the way that we lead our life on a Shabbos, it's, as he says, the perfect formula for that calmness, that stillness, that completely different pace of life. He continues, Shabbos also provides the strongest buffer against panic and anxiety, which is faith and trust in God. When we feel held and looked after by God, we access the state of stillness, meaning at its deepest level, the way that we can truly achieve calmness and tranquility, no matter what is going on in our lives and in the world around us, because essentially we need to be able to do this no matter what else happens outside of ourselves, is by strengthening ourselves in our faith and our trust, our bitachon and emunah in Hashem. Trust in God, he continues, means that we have complete peace of mind that the world and its events are not random and threatening, but a part of a loving plan orchestrated by God for the ultimate good, even when we cannot see how. How pertinent to nowadays. If we can be able to see the world that way, which is extremely difficult in such challenging times for the Jewish people, but that creates a sense of calm. Rabbi Osher Weiss, who's one of the greatest rabbis of the generation, he was speaking just before Shabbos. I saw this sort of a few days ago, and he said that in 1967 he just moved to Israel as a young boy, and the entire country was in panic. It was the 6 days of the 6-day war, and there were enemies on every single side. They weren't sure if the state of Israel was going to even continue to exist. And he said, Rabbi Yechazkel Abramsky, who was one of the Rosh Yeshiva, one of the heads of the yeshiva, was calm. He walked around in a state of calmness. And people said to him, how can you be so calm? How is it with everything that's going on? Aren't you terrified? What about the armies that are surrounding us? And Yechezkel Abramsky said to them, we have one thing. We have incredible unity. And if the Jewish people are so unified, then it's impossible that the state of Israel is going to be annihilated by its enemies. And therefore he was calm. That was what he needed to be calm. And Rabbi Osher Weiss said that nowadays too, the incredible unity that we're seeing. So ultimately, that state of calmness in depth comes from that knowledge, that trusting that we're part of the plan of Hashem, which ultimately must be good, even though we can't see how. As he continues, ultimately this state of menucha, of supreme restfulness and tranquility, is the gateway to all of the things that are most precious to us. The text of our Shabbos prayers states that the menucha we access on Shabbos helps us live with love and generosity, trust and faith, peace, tranquility, stillness and trust. All of those things we're told that we get on Shabbos. It's in Mincha, actually, the Mincha davening of Shabbos. Menuchas ahava and adava, rest of love and giving, of emes, of truth and emunah, of faith, shalom, shalva, peace, serenity. All of those things are the menucha. That's what the rest of Shabbos gives us. If we're flustered and under pressure, he continues, page 33, feeling anxious and frenzied, we do not have the emotional capacity for love, nor the openness for generosity. We lack the presence of mind for truth and faith and the sense of stability to access stillness and trust. If you've ever tried teaching someone anything when they are panicked, or when they are scared, or when they're feeling extremely sad, you can't, because they're just not open to taking in the ideas that you're trying to teach them. You can't do it. It's impossible. They need some time out. They need to take a step back. They need to have the presence of mind to be able to absorb something new. And similarly, all of us, we need to have that emotional capacity. We want to have love. We want to have generosity. We want to have faith in Hashem. We need to be able to take a step back from the frantic pace of life. Otherwise, it's impossible to have those things. And he ends off, Menucha is achieving a state of stillness, which is the gateway to physical, psychological, and spiritual well-being. And Shabbos is the gateway to Menucha, to becoming still. So we want to achieve that stillness, which I think is something so important in our lives nowadays. Shabbos is Hashem's formula to be able to achieve that serenity, to give us that state of well-being, which will improve us as obviously as human beings and certainly as Jewish people ultimately as well. Okay, we're going to say some Tehillim.